So I think we're live here with Dude, What's the Bid? We're on episode 31. 31 times, week on week on week. In 2024, 2024 is actually coming to a close, if you haven't noticed, Casey. But it's coming in close. We are in December, right? Almost mid-December right here. It's been a hell of a year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a crazy year. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of stories. It's, AI, right, coming into the conversation. But, yeah, great time of year. Excited to be here.
Two big raises. You know, we don't really see that too much in the tech space in 2024, but Happy Robot and Vuma both had nice raises this week. And maybe that's a bit of optimism coming in. Will 2025 be any different than 2024? Who knows?
I don't know. Starting to see some rate data indicative of some real price action, right? I mean, I know some people are being cautious as to how quickly this market will heat up, but I mean, you know, freight picked on Monday, drive-ins. Yeah, it's almost $1 million worth of freight picked on Monday, $261 a mile.
That's good. So that's how is that in percentage terms? You know, compared to a couple months ago, or last month, or last week. What you know, ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, you know, week over week, if we're looking at the 10th minus 7. You know, it's up 30 cents a mile. It's $231. This does include fuel. December 3rd. So yeah, 30 cents. Not totally sure what that is on a percentage increase basis, but
good percentage.
It's a really solid bump.
I wonder if this is seasonal, right? If we're looking at seasonal, it'd be interesting to see the numbers in January. See if they you know, certainly probably won't hold completely, but if we have a new floor in the market,
right?
But that's the golden question right now.
That is the question.
It is.
Yeah, my hunch is we'll see higher highs before we see lower lows. I think the bottom is in. Yeah, question is how quickly things heat up. I think at this point in time, and you know, if there are any more carriers that need to bleed the market from the capacity side, there's still questions from the volume and the demand side of things. But also hearing right that you know, another impending port strike might be causing folks to pull some stuff forward as well these days. So not like, you know, we've used up all of our catalysts either.
True. I mean, we should see kind of what the demand side of the equation is going to be in 2025. You know, we have port strikes, we have tariffs, we have maybe some interest rates moves. So it'll be interesting to see on the demand side. On the supply side, the carrier side, you're seeing, I think I've been seeing a little bit more closures going on than we have recently. So we'll see how that pans out and see if that really has any effects at all, right? So whether you're a demand side person or a supply side person, you think that's where the crux of the issues in the market are. We'll see that maybe play out in 2025, hopefully.
Yeah.
And we have a really good guest this week to talk about those issues. We can talk about a little bit of fraud, a little bit about vetting, and really about how many carriers are really out there, especially for brokerages. So with that, you know, I've known it's Michael Caney, Chief Commercial Officer over at Highway. I've known Caney for a while. He was one of my customers at CarrierList. We worked together at FreightWaves for a bit, and he's been over at Highway, you know, for a couple years now. I think so. Time kind of flies about these days. So we'll bring him up to the stage right now. Hello, Michael Caney.
What's up, boys?
What up, Caney?
Everything. How are you doing these days?
I'm great. This is like it's another version of just getting the band back together, which is a lot of my life. It's like there's alumni from companies everywhere, which is fun. It's a lot of fun.
Is, yeah. It puts me back in when we're all three in Chattanooga. They're on Market Street, hashing it.
Well, I'm still on Market Street. I'm back.
That's
baby.
right.
Yeah, that's
I'm back on Market Street.
We're at the office, Highway's office there in Chattanooga.
Right across from the old sports barn garage, like in the Lifestyles building.
Okay, so just right there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Right, same place. Like literally, like I can see our old shop.
Yeah.
My window. Chili's is right there.
Chili's
in the corner.
Yeah, Chili's. Steam is next door as well.
Yep.
Or are they above you?
They're on the other side of the wall. They're next door. They're over
right
on
next
Blood
door.
Street. Yep.
Cool.
They're right next door.
Cool.
So yeah, it's very cool, man.
That's awesome. How many people are in the office these days in Chattanooga?
Ooh, I think we got 10. We've got 10 here, one in Atlanta, one in Nashville. So it ends up being like kind of a regional hub for us.
Yeah.
Michael Grace works with us and he's down in Atlanta. Jesse Thomas, who you guys know, she's in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends up being a cool kind of like regional spot for us to land and gather. And then, you guys know this, like I have a ton of customers in town. And so it's great. It's cool. It's cool being in Chattanooga. And American doesn't have a lot of direct flights anywhere out of Chattanooga, but there's a direct flight to Dallas a couple times a day. So I can go to the HQ when I need to. So it's nice. It's nice having a landing spot.
Very cool. And you guys had a big announcement. It was today, right? It was earlier this morning.
I didn't even plan this, but you guys, I guess you guys get the first live interview after the public announcement. So there you go. Here you go, boys. Like you get they call it a scoop in this business or whatever.
Exclusive.
Exclusive. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So actually, we started going live on December 4th, but we announced publicly today that CH Robinson is a Highway customer and they use our full onboarding solution, identity engine and the whole bit. So man, it's really exciting. It's really exciting.
That is.
And the best part I would tell you is that for a company that's a couple years old, the day that Robinson went live, I was in Dallas on site with one tier one broker. Jordan was at another one. Our implementations team ran the go live and it went well. My phone didn't blow up. Nobody from Robinson called me angry. The thing, a lot of what brokers have experienced with software implementations is just a lot of negativity. You guys know that, right? Like, you get sold one thing, you have a different experience. And Kevin, Jordan, one of the things we set out to do early was say, hey, we want to keep our commitments and we don't want to just say something and give a different experience. And so, to be able to take the country's largest broker live, and it go pretty flawlessly, gave
that
us
is kudos.
More than we're excited about like having them as a customer. It's hey, can we actually deliver on the expectation? Can we actually give them a good experience? And so I think that's being able to announce this today, having a couple of weeks under our belt of servicing them and like looking at their daily reports, and it's just getting better every day. That's what Highway gets really excited about, right? Can we give people a good experience? Can we give carriers a good experience? And so I'd probably highlight that over anything.
Yeah, that is really important, right? Because I talk to a lot of tech companies, a lot of really startup going in stealth, going into beta, and they all have their eyes on the prize, right? Tier one brokerages, and kind of going after that market. And I try to warn them about it a little bit. It's like you have to be ready for prime time when you do that. Not only is the sales cycle much longer, the internal politics of decision making are much more. But if you don't have a finished project or a product, right, a finished product with a track record, it's not worth it. You need to cut your teeth and get some good implementations, get that worked out before you really focus on $1 billion plus in gross revenue brokerages.
Yeah, I think what startups would be better to do is just say, hey, I need 3 customers that are okay letting me hit some speed bumps as we figure this out, right? Rather than saying like we have it all figured out, so they can get to the next fundraising round, and then the customer still never has a great experience. And when you're working with tier one brokers, one of the key things is really understanding not just who you sell to, and this is in SaaS generally speaking, probably, but like especially in our domain, that implementation is going to hit several different user personas in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you don't account for how that carrier rep is interacting with your software, or that sales rep, or the accounting person, or the claims person,
Right.
you know, like
Meet the people
you've
where
got to
they
be
are.
sure that every single person has a positive experience, right? Not just your champion, not just whatever, because if you don't, you actually create you increase the change management for your customer. Change management's already hard enough, right? Like
Yeah.
you make a change, like you especially something like compliance software, kind of a big deal. And if you as the vendor don't take on owning the outcome of making sure that all the user personas are accounted for and
Mhm.
well cared for, you increase the change management burden on the customer. And like we think that's inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think that we should own the outcome on helping the customer through the change management process. And a lot of vendors miss that, in my opinion. They're so focused on like getting the booked ARR because that's where they're valued, right?
Yeah.
And chasing around that they don't understand that retention comes from experience. Like your
Right.
dollar net retention comes from experience. And so if you don't produce a good experience, a booked ARR doesn't mean anything, boys. Like it doesn't mean anything because you're going to lose it. It's going to go right out the door.
Right. If it's not
You're-
sticky, not
Yeah,
becoming
you're-
part of their behavior on a daily basis, you're really kind of setting yourself up for failure when renewals come around.
Yep.
Well, SaaS is nothing without retention.
Yeah.
I mean, SaaS doesn't get any multiples whatsoever without retention.
It's so funny in the SaaS world, like,
And
you know,
that's
'cause
why they
none of
value it
us
so
come
high,
from
right?
that, right? We're all a bunch of transportation guys, right? But like what you learn in freight brokerage is like if your customers love you, they keep giving you freight.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when you translate it to the SaaS world, it's like, well, wait a minute. If you just really take care of your customer, they'll buy from you again.
And again and again.
I guess they
And
call that
again.
retention in SaaS, right? But like,
Yeah.
hey, how about you just give the customer what they want? How about you just do that?
Mm-hmm.
How about you just answer the phone, give them what they want, take really good care of them, and realize that they're the point. That's kind of what we try to live by, man.
Makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
And that's something that, you know, we had Prasad on a couple of weeks ago. He was giving us a little bit of insight into, you know, the value of making sure that, you know, your product is malleable enough to let it evolve as your customers and their needs evolve, right? I mean, if we think about fraud and this problem, it's something that's always evolving, right? There's always a new attack vector, et cetera, et cetera. So making sure that you have those relationships, a great customer success team, and you don't point the finger if you notice people aren't, you know, using your tech, right? It's what can we do better to help these folks adopt the technology and get out of it what you know they should.
Well, and so much of what you're talking about, though, Casey, is really organizational alignment before you get to product alignment. So in my opinion, in companies that get it wrong, a product or a development team can become very dogmatic about how they think something should work.
Yeah.
And maybe even develop it that way or code it that way. And maybe there was a design decision or something made that made really good sense at the time that the decision was made. But culturally, you got to be open to saying, we're going to refactor that. We're going to rethink that. One customer loved it, 10 hated it. And so a lot of that malleability that you talk about is as much cultural as it is technological, right? The technology is going to follow the leadership culture and the values of the business, right? And so if your culture is like, hey, we know more and we're right, your product is going to reflect that, and it's going to be reflected in the customer experience. If your leadership culture is, hey, we're curious and we want to serve and we want to answer the question, then your technology culture is going to say, hey, like, we're going to rapidly refactor if we have to. We're going to own any mistakes. We're going to own the outcome. We're going to listen to the customer. And so a lot of times when people talk about product, what they really have to get to is their culture. What's their leadership culture and what's their operating culture? Because that's what gets baked into the product.
for
And when
sure.
you're selling freight tech, that's what you have to identify. That's one of the big identifiers out there is identifying each brokerage's culture and kind of where they stand.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to sell a product or a feature or service into a place that is just completely resistant to it, right?
Yeah.
Because you do have a pretty wide gulf. You have very tech-forward brokerages, and this is all down the line, right? Very forward-looking and this is how we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And to move them off of that, unless you have something that's really integral to the business, and you're offering that, if it's something tangential or something that's nice to have, it's just tough to change their mind.
Yeah,
exactly. And C.H. Robinson is certainly one of those folks, right, that has built a lot of their own tech.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding, haven't bought a lot of stuff off the shelves. What's that sales process been like? I know when I saw you guys here in Jacksonville at the Technovations event, I think I ran into y'all at the bar hanging out with the C.H. Robinson folks. Seems like you guys had an awesome relationship with them a couple months ago. But if I know Reed or Luke or whoever closed this, and I know they've probably been, banging down this door for a long time and trying to find that alignment that kind of got you to where you guys are today.
Yeah, it's interesting. The interesting about Robinson is that they're not incredibly dissimilar to any large, top 20 broker, in that when you're evaluating where we sit in the tech stack, it's not like a nice to have, like you have to have it and it has to work. And you're kind of evaluating the devil versus the new kid. Right. And so like I started talking to Robinson my first day of employment at the FreightWaves show in November of 22. And like, C.H. Robinson, like as a public company, they can't go out and bet on a startup.
Right.
That's just like, we're just going to rip out what we have. And like, we're going to bet on this company that's been in the market for a couple of months. Like, and that's reasonable, right? They can't just do that. And so, and then like Robinson's public, this can all be followed. Bozeman came in, you follow their last few quarters, and look, and they're great friends of mine now. And so I think it's fair to say, like, everybody was like, man, what's going to happen? I mean, I think even people at Robinson were like, what's going to happen? And it's been a really fun company to watch have another evolution, right? And you watch Kevin, I know you track the stuff, like you listen to their calls and you're like, oh man, like this is working. This is a company that's been around a long time that is actually, and they are evolving. They are making changes. They are becoming again the standard bearer. And so at the same time as they were really making changes and transforming their culture, Highway was really growing, and we just kind of stayed in touch. Would come up and we'd be able to answer those things, and we gained a tremendous amount of market share. And so that was really, just really a courtship of getting to know each other culturally, as well as, what our product did. And there was a point at which it was just like, okay, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. We should do this, is really kind of what it came down to. There was just like this natural kind of consummation of the relationship where it was like, yeah, the next step, like this all lines up. We got our type 2 SOC 2. There was a lot of things we were able to do as a legitimate technology company, right? Like, to be able to sustain a customer like them.
Did you mention socks?
Yeah. So
I guess that's something that a lot of people that I didn't even think about it until you just mentioned it. Is like socks. What socks being? I can't even remember the name. Oxley, right? Socks Baines or Oxley, right? Which is SEC reporting. Okay. You talk to any reporting or public company, and especially when you get into claims vetting, legal type of issues. Those processes have to be documented. You have to be compliant with that. You have to know. Yeah. You have to have some kind of expertise in doing that, which a lot of startups just aren't equipped to do.
Yeah, and we did that early. It's there's less. So anybody that wants to go like talk to ChatGPT about this, it's really easy. Just SOC. Yeah. SOC. There's a type 1 and a type 2. What does it mean to be SOC compliant? And I think it's a credibility to Jordan's time on Wall Street and working at a public financial institution, understanding the importance of like controls like even from day one, like I'm not allowed to negotiate customer contracts like red lines because I might be a little motivated to accept things, right? Like for speed. And so, even from day one, we have this check and balance that's really important culturally when you're dealing in fraud protection and cybersecurity. And, then we got our SOC 2 Type 2, which means that we've got an audit history of, like, we all have to go through training, like employees have to go through training to carry this designation. And so it was really important to us that we didn't just take uncontested shots, but that we were accountable to an authority outside of ourselves for these claims that we were making about our security measures and about privacy measures. And so, it's sometimes it's when we get into with a tier one and they're like, hey, here's our InfoSec process. We're like, yeah, here's our compliance report. Here's our latest audit. And usually the InfoSec is the easiest part of what we do when we bring on a large broker, because our stuff's pretty buttoned up, which is I'm proud of that, right? Because that's not typically something that a company in the market less than 3 years is able to do.
Certainly not. And it makes it a lot easier going into the conversations, whether it's C.H. Robinson or anybody else. Having that social proof, I'm not sure who the accrediting body is for SOC 1, SOC 2, but I don't know, pretty sure most sales programs will tell you, if you've got nice logos on your website, right? I mean, I know that you guys probably have the next 4 guys in the top 5 champing at the bit to compete with C.H. Robinson, working with you all. And you got the designations from a data security perspective that's kind of granted from a agnostic or outside of the freight industry type of body. Then it's got to be super duper helpful, right? The less questions that you got to answer about data security, the more likely you are to make some serious headwinds, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk about social proofing and other brokers. One of the things that I've been really encouraged by is the way that brokers that are typically pretty vehement competitors, right? Like they're Mark Ford said this on a panel recently, and Mark's a backhaulers, Robinson, Coyote, Blue Grace, like everybody knows Mark. And he said, brokers don't want to compete. The good brokers, they don't want to compete on fraud, right? Everybody wants it gone, right? No. Like the brokers want to compete, but they want to compete on like who's a better broker, who can build a better niche, who can actually build a better tech stack. And what everyone's realized, and Robinson included, is that like having a corrupt system, right? Having a lot of fraud and corruption in transportation networks actually slows everyone's innovation. It actually slows their ability to compete. So there is a collective agreement that, hey, we all need to work together to a certain degree, right? Until we start beginning to cross, competitive lines. Yeah. Like it's in our best interest that all of us make this go away, right? Or make it go away as much as possible.
Yeah, it's bad for the entire industry. It's a black eye. It keeps freight not coming to 3PLs if the entire industry has this black eye of fraud, right? Yeah. So you need to everyone needs to come together, squeeze that out to increase the pie.
All right, so Kevin, let's talk about that. So tell me how you've seen things change. Because I have a thesis that, obviously we only serve freight brokers. We don't sell to shippers.
Yeah.
And we, I don't think there needs to be as many brokers as there are, and so I want to hear from you. Like, let's just do this a little bit in your own research. Like, how many legitimate brokers are there? I think there's a couple thousand brokers that control most of the freight in North America. When you really look at volumes and you really consider, so let's talk about the numbers, because what I think is that we're going to see a consolidation of freight. I think this like digital freight broker, Uber ride sharing thing. Look at what Uber's doing. Like they're becoming they're servicing brokers, right? They've got a really solid thesis around that. I think we've seen it like that doesn't work. Okay. Like this, like brokers aren't going away. I do think they'll consolidate. and I think shippers will begin consolidating to the best in class, right? And I don't know that shippers want to go back to trying to manage 20 truck fleets.
No.
I think we've proven that freight brokers are best in class at managing a small carrier. So in terms of like the brokerage census, man, what are you seeing change in your own research?
Yeah, so to start with the last point first, I think there is a move, and COVID accelerated that. It's ticked down a couple percentage points over the last, let's say 2023 into 2024, but it's still at a higher floor, right? And that is the percentage of freight that's tendered to freight brokerages in general, right? If we take the entire pie, right? And that is, historically, 2017, 2018, it's around 15% of truckload freight, right? If you take ATA, you strip out the private fleet data or the revenues and just go with commercial for hire, you take the brokerage revenues, right, and just divide those, you get about 15, 16%. In 2022, that got up to 25%. Right? I think it's back down to about 22% or 21%, which is still a hell of a move up, right? And I think that is something that is going to grow year over year, right? I think, as you said, I think a lot of the large asset players are now brokerages. They're kind of 3PLs with assets in a lot of ways, right? So
Schneider, Warner, Hunt, we do business. Knight. I mean, all my customers all have significant logistics businesses. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're blurring the lines between asset-based and brokerage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because all asset-based companies of any size have a large brokerage, right? And then you have the pure play 3PL. So I think on the managed side, that the pie is growing, and the pie is going to continue to grow, which is a bullish case for freight brokerage. Going back to the numbers, I think you probably have 1,000, maybe 1,200 brokerages out there out of that almost 26,000 active MC numbers, right? Which active MC numbers, a lot of noise in that, kind of like active MC numbers for carriers. There's a lot of noise in that, you have to really pick through. But you have about 1,000, 1,200 that probably have 10 employees or more doing 10 million or more in revenue, right?
Yep. Yeah, I fall in about the same. I land on about the same place, Kevin.
Yeah, and if you want to take that down to 5 million or 4 million or 3 million, right? But
you're one customer away from not being a freight broker at that point.
Yeah. Yep. So maybe another 2,000 or 3,000 that might fit that mold. I'm kind of uncertain about that number. And then you have everybody else, right, who are not really doing much business whatsoever, right? So they're, if you're selling tech products, they're not a great market to serve. And
no.
I've been through it 2 or 3 different times,
yeah.
right, of evaluating that market, and it's just not a great market to serve.
No. Well, I mean, I think
there's nothing wrong with it. It's great.
No,
business.
I think that broker.
I'm not saying that.
No, I think that broker that's running a good lifestyle business, they want to be on their own. They want to be a business owner. They want to have a tax shelter. Like, that's a great business.
It's a great business.
They need really solid, easy automated products, right? Like they may be a highway customer, but like they use our login and look product, which is not a ton of value, not a lot of scale in it, but like, all right, it's a few $100. Like, you want to log in and look at some stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's the old carrier list that we bought, was the bedrock of that. Like, you want to look at some carriers, you want to see if they're bad at, like, great. But like, you're not going to run a really robust.
Well, I think, if you're a SaaS company, freight tech, you're looking at like probably, I think on the bare minimum, 20,000 a year in ARR, right? More like 50,000 to really be able to scale up, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that 23,000 at least of those 25,000 active MC numbers
not there.
You're not going to make it there, right? There are probably 1,500 if we're just talking about 3PL domestic freight. 1,500. It's not that wide of a net, right?
And do you think, Kevin, we could see as much as 20% of that market consolidate?
Yeah,
I see it collapse.
Yeah, I do, right? Because I think you have you have your top tier shippers, right?
Yep.
And you have great inroads with that. That pie's not growing all that much.
No.
Right? Those top tier shippers. So unless you figure out how to really be very efficient at getting SMB shippers, right? Which is tough, especially when you get, say, you're $1 billion in revenue, right? Or $5 billion in revenue, right? How many SMBs do you need to really move the needle?
Yeah.
And to scale that up is very difficult. So I think those top tier, really revenue producing customers are in short supply. And I think consolidation, I think 20% is not a wild number whatsoever over the next 5 or 10 years to see that. And I think you kind of see it here in the downturn. You're going to see it in an upturn, right? When people really start getting greedy. And I think that's just a long-term trend.
So, okay. Go ahead, Casey.
I don't know. Where do you think brokerage goes in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think it collapses. I think it starts shrinking. I think there's 1,000 players, right? I mean, and when you look at what did Frank Caviar said that, with RXO purchasing Coyote, that the top 9 brokers control 50% of the volume, right? So I think, but here's something that's interesting, Kevin. I want to talk about how data could impact. So you talk about top shippers, right? But top shippers are not most of the freight. They're really not. In the same way that most capacity is the small carrier. Like, I've consulted, I don't know, 35, 40 brokers.
Right.
And I look at their customer list. I'm always like, oh, I know those 5 shippers. I know those 6 shippers. And I was amazed. I had this one broker, $120 million business. And I looked at their customer list and I knew 1 shipper on it. And I was like, how did this happen? And it was incredible to me how they built $100 million business, and it was a profitable business, not like $100 million like it was a good profitable like 3-4% EBITDA business. And I didn't know any of the shippers. There's none of the blue chips were there. None of the usual, a little bit of AB, a little bit of Procter and Gamble, a little bit of like co-brokering with 7 3PL. None of it was there. All regional, within their region, mid-market businesses.
What was their marketing strategy?
The boots on the ground in their region.
Just knocking doors, old school.
Yeah. And I mean, they've been in business 20 years, Casey. So a lot of it, they built this following in this region. And I have another old consulting client in Texas, $20 million business. I don't know any of those customers. Like they had a real niche and like final mile, white glove delivery. And so I think that there are probably a lot of brokers that do really unique things that nobody knows about. And I think there is an entire look at the mid-market shipper that we don't get a good look at. That we don't. Oh yeah. We, the industry, and that's still, I think, the densest part.
It is
of North American manufacturing is that middle market space. How do you where does you live? You have a data enrichment product. Like when you think about like Shipper CRM, when you think about Sales Dash, when you think about Brush Pass,
GenLogs.
How do you see data enrichment changing like a freight broker's access to other parts of the shipper market?
I think it's key, and I'll go back to AI with this, right? And that's something Shipper CRM's kind of doing with AI as well. It's kind of, there's so many. There's just so many mid or SMB shippers out there, right? You talk about long tail, it's why is trucking fragmented? Why is brokerage fragmented? Because shippers are fragmented, right? And you have to have a lot of small players doing very specific things for customers, right? So you have this huge SMB, but you're talking about the $120 million brokerage who, that is so hard to do. I think it's hard to replicate, or no one's figured that out. And that is where really the key value comes from.
Like Mark just posted a comment about being in the oil and gas, right?
Yeah.
Rarely using brokers, mainly going with local carriers. I do think what's interesting about those niches, though, is they just start building on themselves, right? Like, so I ran an oil and gas division in a brokerage. I was like, oh man, we have this one oil and gas customer, and like we started moving pipe. And when you learn how to move oil and gas freight, it's a niche, right? Like Are they stringing pipe? Or is it like there's all these different things about like
they're transferable, right?
Are you meeting a crane? Are you and those carriers also don't live on load boards. Right. So what's really interesting is like once you build that carrier network and you realize how similar most oil and gas networks are from a transportation standpoint, you can grow that business really quickly. Right? Because they're all buying and selling from each other. Like they're all doing the same stuff. And they're all doing it in the same regions. And it's the same kind of micro network of carriers moving it. So if you can learn to run those networks. And so anyway, that's what I think is interesting is if you can learn to run those networks for those niche shippers, you can actually grow your brokerage a lot faster than with a massive cold calling strategy. Yeah. Your customer acquisition cost is lower. You know what I mean?
Right.
When I was a brokerage, I did flatbed in and out of Mexico, right? And we were really set up. We had a great shop.
Did you say I'd like to do the hardest thing possible? Like, was that your idea?
I just landed in it, right? And I started doing the hardest thing. But once you learn the hardest thing possible, that means that you can talk shop with anyone who, and it's a very confusing thing, right? Going in that, so shippers didn't know what they're doing. So you're basically a consultant, right? And you can grow your book of business very much quicker than trying to cold call everybody in the world, trying to get, a tomato load here, or DC to DC Walmart moves, high volume. It looks really good on paper. But it's hard to move if you don't know how to move it.
Yeah. And
I think that's what you see in a lot of respects. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I'll tie this back into fraud, why fraud is sometimes easier in brokerage, because you have a lot of brokers out there trying to move loads that they really shouldn't be moving, that they don't have that much knowledge about. And it's just, a load from A to B, I'm going to get paid this margin. And, I don't really need to know too much about it. And that invites people to prey on you, maybe. I don't know if that's true or not. It just came to my mind.
No, I think you're correct. But there were several things that contributed to it. One of the things that I've said almost every appearance I do is that we went digital before we put any KYC, KYB in place. We built, brokerages built these networks and, of carrier reps calling and faxing rate confirmations and doing validations. And then we were like, hey, we should go sign up for this book it now thing or build a portal. And like, we just said, cybersecurity, that's for banks. And we just like, nah, that's fine. It'll be okay. And so like we essentially built open, unsecured digital networks, essentially what we did. And it wasn't a huge thing. And then all of a sudden there was oh my gosh, there's a freight boom. Let's go throw bodies at that problem. And so, Kevin, like when you think about the thousands of young professionals that were hired across thousands of brokers, just go fast and cover freight.
Yeah.
You had a couple year period where like that is a fraudster's dream.
It is.
There's no security. There's like all that tribal knowledge that you had, you just diluted it. You just diluted it. Like all the stuff that you and I knew because we were sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
Well, now we have 72 people, they're just furiously booking freight. Like I can't think of a better way to steal freight than in that environment.
When did you start booking freight, Caney? When did
2004.
2000. So you've been around forever, right? So I started in about 2011, 2012. And if you go back to fraud in those days, you might get a bulletin here, you might get a bulletin there. Someone might steal $50 from you on a fuel advance or
what have you. Yeah. Like the worst thing we ever went through, other than a straight theft of a Hanes load. I remember that one still.
Was that underwear?
It's probably t-shirts or something. I'll tell you how valuable they are. Is ComCheck scams. Doctor the rate confirmations, send it in. Send it out. I mean, we lost a lot. We lost a lot of money on ComCheck scams. That was the big one. Wasn't theft.
Yep.
What were you going to say? Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, ComCheck too. So okay, so remember back 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, almost, right, or 6, 7 years ago, it is. You explained it right there. We went digital before we had any security set up to go digital,
Yep.
and you've seen an influx of really organized crime come in, and very complex fraudsters who have
Yep.
just been preying on this industry for a few years now.
Yep.
With very little recourse to it. And so the nature of fraud has really changed. I guess that's my point.
It's changed, Kevin, and is changing.
Yeah.
Right.
It is
Really?
because
Well, go ahead, Casey.
Is it organized crime at all involved in these rings?
100%. 100%.
The cartels?
I don't know about that. I mean, I watched the episode of Lioness the other day. I'm scared to talk about the cartels. I don't want to talk about that. They're evidently really dangerous people. But I don't know that it's cartels as much as it's just there's international groups that have figured out that they can be somewhere else in the world and control trucks here and steal freight. And it's cybercrime, right? They pull down the FMCSA data in mass. They look for anomalies in the data. They try to mass update carrier profiles and gain control. The thing that has changed, we do business with so many large brokers that we cut the honey hole off a lot, right? Like we protect enough broker networks that a lot of the freight that is targeted is with the larger brokers, and we put walls around that. And so now, in order to steal freight, you have to gain control of an MC or gain access to an MC. You have to gain control of several because they want to steal a lot of freight at one time. They want to steal 10, 15, 20 loads at a time, and they want to do it from several brokers. And so we've made it hard because we move so fast. Where used to, they would be able to hold an MC and steal 10 loads over a week.
Mm-hmm.
And now as soon as something changes, we see it. Like we've caught stuff at the dock before. We've called a broker and said, hey, I think this carrier, something's going on. Call the ship. Like we can see it in transit, call the shipper, tell them not to load that truck. Like that's how close we're getting to it. So I think what you see changing is that the cyber nature of it, in order to gain access to the amount of data that they need to look for exposure, that's getting more advanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So
and their willingness to pay a lot of money to otherwise legitimate carriers to get their credentials. They don't even want the MC. They want their credentials.
When you say credentials, what is that?
To whatever, to DAT, to an MFA code somewhere. Like they're paying money for access.
Okay. Bank account information being one of those, right?
No, they don't care about the about the bank account. I mean, there's only one provider that does that. And they're small. Like they don't care about the bank account information. They care about the information they need to get access. They're looking for intel, Kevin, right? So which shipper, like health and wellness products are a big high target item right now. If you're a broker listening to this, shipping health and wellness products, you need to be using a high value class or a specialized class that we have that tightens the reins up a little bit. They want to know which brokers have those. So they want to get on the load boards. They want to get on a broker's private load board. They want to get on a public load board, and they want to move one or two of them. So they can see what the dock is like and what the hours are like and what you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They don't want to steal the first one. They want to steal the third one.
Yeah.
So the credentials get them intel. It's like casing the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what they're after. Can I just go get the intel so that I can decide what I want to steal and when I want to steal it? And they work together. It's a coordinated thing. Right? So they'll steal stuff. What they want to do is they want to steal stuff, and they don't even want to keep it as much anymore as they just want to shake you down for money, and they want to go stick it in 10 different warehouses.
Okay.
And tell you, hey, why are we $25,000 if you want your load back?
I guess. So you could seal it and stick it in several different or liquidate it, right? You know,
Yep.
health and wellness, very good, very liquid thing. You can get
Yep.
rid of it, and you probably have buyers lying around the corner.
Yep.
If you steal that, but you're still shaking down the brokerage.
Yeah, it depends. Like different actors have different MO.
Okay.
Like some they just want to exploit you. They just want to go, hey, like they know that it's a reputational issue, and they just want cash.
Is that the most? And one of my questions I was going to ask you is like coming into maybe last 12 months, last 24 months, whatever time frame you want to use. How have the different scams evolved? Right? Has there been evolution of going from one to the other, kind of where we were looking at the most prevalent scams a year ago compared to what the most prevalent scams are today?
It's I'll be honest with you. I'll give you kind of like my anecdotal feedback. It's harder for me to tell you because we don't see as much theft anymore because in our network we solve 99% of it. So we don't see it as much. We see it earlier when we were learning, like we have one slip through every now and then. What I can say is the attempts that we've seen, the vectors that we've seen change are these massive data breaches, right? And phishing, right? There's a lot, like we shut down 3 domains a day impersonating, like get signed up with highway.com. Like there's no get signed up with highway.com. That website doesn't exist. It's fake, right? So we see just a lot of like, they can't get in, so they're trying to phish. So we see a lot of phishing as a big vector. Phishing for DAD credentials, phishing for, a way to get into a highway network. The other thing we do is we see a lot of like bad actors will try to they'll try to get access to a lot of brokers at one time, right? So that's a vector. When I talked to Scott Cornell, who's probably the smartest guy in cargo theft, there's a growth in straight cargo theft again. Like, and I just steal freight from a truck stop, right? There's a growth in straight cargo theft. And one of the places where, vendors are going to have to collaborate and get better at is figuring out the pilferage piece. So the pilferage is I get to steal things and nobody knows for 6 months.
Yes.
I get to go flip the bolts, right?
Yeah.
On the locking mechanism.
I
unscrew 4 bolts, the bolt seal and the whole lot comes off. I steal 20 TVs, I doctor the bill lading, put it back on, I deliver it, nobody knows for 6 months.
Right.
And so a bad actor can do that 100 times before anybody knows it happened.
Yep.
Right. You better
pick it up, deliver it, nobody knows.
An astute inventory manager, keeping track of stock in the warehouse and figuring out, oh my gosh, I've been, I'm short 1,000 TVs. Or I think the use case that I heard Craig Helmrich and Jordan, your CEO, Graf, talk about at one of these TIA events was these guys were stealing Mentos off the back of a truck, just a couple pallets here and there. And then, 6 months down the road, an inventory manager is like, I don't have any more Mentos. Where are all my Mentos? I thought I was getting a full truckload of Mentos. Like, no, you've been getting 80% of a full truckload of Mentos for 6 months. And, you're just now realizing it.
But what blows me away about that, Casey, is that, I'm sitting here talking about all of our SOC 2 compliance and our proprietary identity engines and our patent filings, all this stuff that we're doing. And a shipper method of security is a printed bill of lading that a person carries in their truck and then hands to somebody else, and they stand there and count it and go, sounds good. Like, that blows me away.
Doesn't seem very secure.
So all you have to do is doctor that bill of lading.
Very easy.
And you don't know that there was supposed to be 50. If the bill of lading says 47 and it's a shipper count and because we don't driver count anymore, right? And so the driver has no accountability. Like, it was a long time ago, right? Kevin, like, the driver had to count. The driver had to count and verify in order to sign that bill. Well, now the driver's not allowed on the dock. So the driver takes a bill and is making an assumption that shipper put on there what was meant to be put on there. Where back in the day you had to count, right? And then then you had to stand there. There was a time in transportation where the driver had to stand there and watch them unload the truck and count as the unloader unloaded the truck, and that doesn't exist anymore. So there's a massive assumption taken that the bills are clean if the number's right. Now, and the shippers are going to have to figure out how to create some standards to fix that digitally. They're going to have to.
And that's an interesting point too, because we're talking about, fraud on the truck, right? Fraud during the transportation movement, but there's a whole, probably something that I'm not really too aware of whatsoever, is a fraud that happens at the warehouse. Happens at the delivery point, or the consignment, or the pickup or delivery point, right? In that whole network between shippers and warehousing, DC centers, that's kind of outside the transportation piece.
Yeah. I think the technology that's going to live in that space is super interesting. One of the things that you're going to see over time as technology evolves is this intersection of which is what, I mean, Kevin, you were around here early. We think a lot about the intersection of a digital footprint and a physical footprint, and how do you compare those things and look for either consistencies, right, that gives somebody, a good grade, or anomalies that make you want to go, I'm going to ask some more questions, right? And so I think, to Mark's question in the comments, I think you're going to continue to see, particularly in truckload freight, technology that is cost effective, that enables you to bring the digital and physical world together. And I think one of the companies that's the best at this right now is Tive. And not just, I mean, maybe because I'm particular to Richie, because, he's part of our FreightWaves alumni network. Yeah. But I think they're really good at it, right? I mean, you can take a Tive device. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's reusable. It's got a long, low voltage battery life. And if you're a shipper and you're a high value shipper, I don't understand why you just don't have a network of Tive devices if it's important to you, and just make that, a part of your cost. Or if you're a broker, bake that into your rate and provide that. I think that's a really efficient way for the right type of freight to provide, a pretty cost effective way of knowing what's going on in that trailer.
It is. It definitely is, because I mean, you're talking about health and wellness, right? You're talking about anything that you can liquidate pretty quickly, to different corner stores, or to go, is pretty high value, and it's been sniped at all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, absolutely. Sure. I guess that's a burden that's been put onto the brokerage in a lot of cases, right? Caney, the trucker, no longer is counting the pallets on the dock. And it seems like a lot of these problems, whether it's, you're moving the freight for the BCO, right, beneficial cargo owner, the shipper, to do so, right, you got to start to take on a lot of these responsibilities. It sounds like, right, you're responsible for fighting the fraud, you're responsible for a whole bunch of different things that I don't know if it's good or if it's bad, right? But if the shippers were more involved in trying to fight this stuff, or digitizing in a way that would allow the information to flow freely and eliminate some of that interference in transmission, right, that allows for fraud, could be much more efficient market. One thing that's interesting these days, I don't know if you guys are keeping an eye on it, is the transparency conversation, right? I think the FMCSA, I don't know if I understand this correctly, is asking, I guess transparency has always been legislated, right? Carriers and shippers, if you're involved in a freight transaction, you're technically allowed to go to a broker, ask them for records to figure out what their margins are. But, they can tell you, I'm working on it, and there's no deadlines associated with it or things like that. I don't know. Are you guys keeping an eye on that legislation? What's going on there?
There's been an element of, I'm not as familiar with the rule, but it's been in place for a long time. What I would say about transparency is, I think the guy to really ask is Adam Wingfield, not because he'll talk about transparency, but he's probably one of the best voices at helping a motor carrier run their business. And the reality is, like, knowing what a broker makes on a load doesn't make you a better business operator. And like, if you are not fiscally responsible with your business today as a motor carrier, a broker giving you more money is not going to make you more fiscally responsible. Like, because we see that in personal finance, right? Like during COVID, we gave people money to just go out and light it on fire, right? And so the reality is, a lot of carriers, like nobody told carriers they need to go out and buy $200,000 used Peterbilts during the boom. It was a terrible idea. I could have bought 20 of them when I ran a fleet, and I didn't. I was like, I don't want to be sitting on that debt. This thing's coming back down. I'm not buying these trucks, right? I mean, other people bought them. That's on you, man. Like, that's on you, right? Like, don't go buy a house you can't afford. And so I think, people want to get up in arms because John Rogers posts about some single load rip or one TQL load. And like you that's one load.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I used to set loss goals because I knew that in order to operate a shipper really efficiently, we had to take a loss on a certain percentage of loads.
Uh-huh.
And I used to tell my salespeople, you're not losing enough money. And they'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm telling you, on that shipper, if you're only doing the easy thing that's good for you, someone's going to come in and take your business. Like, you got to go take these 20 loads. Or we're going to lose money. I'm like, I know we're going to lose money. But if you look at the whole account, we're going to have that account. We're going to have it for a long time. And the average is going to be this. Right. And so that's how good brokers think. They don't think transactionally.
Right.
They think about the profitability of an account or a group of accounts. And so, like, that's not a,
I agree.
you know what I'm saying, Casey? Like, I just don't understand how this tell me what you made on a load is going to fix anything, because it's not how a business is run.
Well, it's built on bad data, right? Because you can go to the public companies, right? Oh, sorry, Casey.
No, you go ahead. I think.
Oh, you can go to the public companies, right? There's 10 or 15, right? And you can see what their average margin is each quarter, right? Of all those loads. It's not 40%. It's not 50%. It is, even at the height of the pandemic, it might have touched 18 or 19%. You look at any industry data, it's 16, 17%, right? That's what brokerage margins are, right? Sure, there's going to be loads that are 40%, 50%, maybe 100%, depending on how desperate someone is to move that. But you're going to be losing money on loads. And so number one is just built on bad, and it's kind of harkens back to regulation, right? It harkens back to set rates or set margins, right? Which is not healthy for either the broker or the carrier. Right. It's just all. Yeah. It's just all based on bad data.
Yeah. And I think we just all need to, like, take a deep breath, slow down, right? Stop playing like social media transportation expert, right? Like a lot of us do on, or like Monday morning quarterbacking, right? And there's a couple principles, like when, like Casey, when the price of your Zen goes up, do you walk to the cashier and demand to know the profit margin to see if it's fair?
Of course not.
No, you buy your Zen, you go to the golf course, or you go play pickleball, and you're like, shit, my Zen went up.
Right.
And if you don't like the price, you don't buy the Zen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, like, and I want to respond to a comment, like, Jeff, I understand where you're coming from, my man. But anytime someone says blank is the singular problem, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. Because there is no one thing that is the problem. Is the lack of training in different parts of our business an area of opportunity? Absolutely. I ran a business. I had 3 million square feet of warehouse across a number of buildings. I could also tell you that my guys getting talked into a different PO on the dock was a problem that a broker can't fix. Like a dock worker just getting tired of dealing with a driver that didn't know where they were going, and be like, hey, just load him up with this. It's going to the same city. Well, let me tell you something. When you have a multi-client warehouse and you just load somebody up with something because it's going to the same city, you could be sending the wrong product to that shipper in the same city. That's not a broker problem. That's a dock worker on a Friday afternoon that wants to go home. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like, I think when we talk about transparency or we talk about, it's like this finger pointing, everybody like, whoa, can we just slow down and say, hey, everyone could just own their side of the street a little bit better, right? Everyone could just take responsibility for owning the things that they can control, right? So what can a broker control, right? Absolutely. The quality of your employees, right? The vetting of your carriers, right? Your own pricing and profit margins. Like this is not much different than our own personal lives. Like, why don't we take responsibility for the things that we can control and worry a little bit less about the things that are outside of our control? I think as an industry, if we said, hey, we're all going to operate with excellence on those things that we have direct control over, we all respectively did that, it would be a lot easier to collaborate in the middle. All right. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I get a little fired up about stuff like that. But like, it's not just like blame the brokers. They don't know how to train anybody. That's not true.
Right.
And I don't think Jeff was trying to blame brokers. Jeff has a very he's a broker himself. There's a very high standards for how brokers should operate. Yeah. And when you have 150,000 W-2 brokers out there, you're going to get all kinds of expertise and people doing what they're doing. So,
but whoa, Buc-ee's doesn't sell Zins. Buc-ee sells everything.
I know. Buc-ee's will sell Velo, other nicotine pouches, but I actually did learn they don't sell Zyn because they can't make enough margin on it. They sell their gas at a super low markup, and then they make a whole bunch of money on people that go into the store and buy the shit. So yeah, I guess they decided not to sell Zyn because they're not making enough
money on it. So let me explain to you that, like, I mean, we're one of those people that we do the over under when the family stops at Buc-ee's, and it's usually pretty bad. Like the Buc-ee's pit stop in the Caney family is usually a pretty, it's expensive endeavor. And Casey, most of the time I don't even eat gas. We just park to go get brisket sandwiches or whatever it is we're getting.
It's a tourist attraction. I've never seen anything like it. It's absurd.
I won't stop on the weekends.
You stop on a Sunday or like
don't do that.
Traveling for Thanksgiving. Yeah. It's insane. 200 pumps.
Don't stop on. And what's funny is like Buc-ee's doesn't allow trucks in, but there's always like 4 or 5 guys with like a fifth wheel and like a 25-foot that are still doing the same kind of clog up situation that you want to avoid. Like the guy that's headed to go with his side-by-sides, he's got a trailer full of like Polaris side-by-sides. There's always the Buc-ee's traffic jam is always like an interesting thing to navigate.
It is. It is. So let's wrap it up here. Michael, what's the next big thing for Highway?
Yeah, I think everything that you'll see from us coming up this year is really thinking about load level visibility. What we learned really quickly is that there's, we kind of knew there was no magic bullet. There's some things that we thought early would catch more than it did. And what we've learned really quickly is that you've got to protect a broker on every single load. You've got to think about the origin destination pair. You have to think about the risk associated with a specific origin destination pair and like where things are. You've got to think about the commodity that's being shipped, right? And so like things that are targeted versus type of insurance. And you've got to be able to do that on every single load. So you have to be able to dynamically evaluate the operating capability of a carrier and what's going on with their insurance and their risk profile and down to the truck level. Like, should this carrier be hauling this load? And you gotta be able to do that on every single load. Like, you gotta be able to do that on every single load. And so everything that Highway's thinking about is real-time load level visibility from a compliance standpoint. And then the other thing that we're thinking about is the carrier experience, right? Like carriers need to have a very fast experience. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to get onboarded. The good carriers need to be able to go really fast. They need to have access to great insurance, great freight brokers, great payment resources. So a lot of our partnerships are geared around helping the best carriers go really fast, get paid quickly, have access to the best freight, being prioritized in our search results. So, I mean, if you're a great carrier, we want you to have a great experience, have access to the best freight, and get paid the fastest.
Yes.
Awesome.
For sure. And I think that is part of the, I don't know, just piggyback on the transparency thing. It's like, the problem is a lot of these small carriers don't know what their operating costs are, right? Their price search cost is super duper high. They don't have a great way of knowing what, my truck is worth on Monday versus Tuesday versus Wednesday in a specific lane. And then I think like one of the things in this legislation that is being proposed is, provide me with the margin information within 48 hours. Like the market changes pretty quickly. You guys know 48 hours is not fast enough to be able to stop fraud. Like you got to know what is going on today. So any carriers in the audience would challenge you guys to think about if there are better sources out there, better trees to bark up to lower that price search cost and give yourself a better chance to understand what your OR is. So you can better understand, what freight you need to take to be profitable.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned, like working at and running brokerages inside of a carrier and actually having my own fleet a couple of times, is what I wanted more than anything was not like big margins, Casey. It was just consistency.
Right. Don't lose money.
I just wanted velocity and yield. I wanted to get those trucks as consistent and repeatable as possible.
Asset
you know what I mean?
Utilization, baby. I think we get it twisted a lot of times. It's all about keep the wheels rolling, baby.
And everything I thought about was like, what can I do to keep the truck seated? How can I keep the driver's pay as consistent as possible? How can he or she have a great life with me and make really consistent money that increases with the market as appropriate? Like my big thing was like, can I just keep it consistent? Can I just drive out the noise? And I think that's the hardest thing to do if you're a carrier running a small fleet, especially if you're chasing spot loads. It's really difficult to do. Call Adam Wingfield. He's better at that than me.
Will do. Well, Michael, thanks for dropping by. Dude, what's the bid this week?
No, thank you. I thought you were asking me a question. Like, I don't know what the bid.
No.
No, it's so fun. No, it's so fun. Like, it's just like chopping it up, like sitting in a living room with you guys. It's so great.
I know.
Maybe someday we'll end up back in the same city again.
Maybe one of these days, yeah. At a conference, at something. We can sit down and chop it up.
We'll do it.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, boys.
With that said,
good talking to you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good talking to you too, man. Take care. So, Casey, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Freight is a different price Monday than it is Tuesday, than it is Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. To Caney's point, right? Like, you got to own it. You got to own it to stay profitable. Who knows when this market's going to heat up completely and allow for folks to buy $200,000 used Peterbilts again. But hopefully we've learned enough through this, protracted downturn over the last 3 years to give folks experience they need to iron out some of these crazy fluctuations we see in the market. I know a lot of folks are learning and excited to be finishing the year on a strong note. Freight pick Monday, 261.
261.
Haven't seen rates like that in at least a year.
That's good. Hopefully 2025 is going to be a better year. Probably not crazy better, but hopefully better. And if you don't have your fraud and compliance game in top grade position, then you need to. And you can always give Michael Caney over at Highway a call.
Amen to that. I know he's got some good sales guys that'll be happy to help you out.
He does. I think we might know those guys too.
Certainly do.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that wraps it for this week. We'll see you next Thursday, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, for Dude, What's the Bid?
See ya.